stupid, stupid, and stupid!
You're so stupid!
Hello, and welcome to Government is Fucking Stupid. Now, if we accept the premise that government is the most stupid of all human institutions, then war must be the stupidest behavior these stupid institutions could possibly engage in. Now, the actual causes of war, distilled down to the pure math of it all, have been thoroughly explained elsewhere on YouTube by people far better than I could ever do it, by people who are highly qualified to do it. So it would be really fucking stupid of me to even try to replicate the work of someone like William Spaniel here. So I won't, because I would just fail spectacularly anyway. Um, and the specific causes of wars between nations really isn't the point of this episode. My point is that wars require stupid governments in the first place, and we've got a sterling example here of an incredibly stupid war launched by a massively stupid government to look at today. Now, way back on February 20th of 2022, Vladimir Putin launched his special three-day military operation to topple the government in Kyiv and return the people of Ukraine to a state of Soviet-style vassalage to Russia. Now, trust me, by their very nature, governments, being fucking stupid, make miscalculations all the time. I mean, back in 1999, NASA lost a $327 million Martian probe designed to orbit Mars and study its atmosphere. And the probe was intended to enter Mars's orbit at about 99.5 miles above the Martian surface. But because one of the engineering teams on the project used the metric measurement of newtons for calculating force, and a different engineering team on the same project used the imperial pounds force measurement, the probe's navigation software consistently miscalculated the craft's trajectory, and this caused it to enter Mars's orbit at about 33.5 miles, or 35.5 miles above the surface, thus causing it to burn up pretty quickly from atmospheric friction. Now, embarrassing? Well, yeah, and expensive. I mean, to you and I, yeah, this would be staggeringly expensive. But in the scope of governments and how they spend money, this isn't a very big example of government waste, really. And most importantly, no one died. But we can chalk up the loss of the Mars Climate Orbiter to a result of governments miscalculating things, right? Well, Russia's loss of the Russo-Ukrainian War, starting with the catastrophic loss of the Battle of Kyiv, is the result of just a massive series of really stupid miscalculations. And those miscalculations began with the planning of the war itself and were committed up and down the chain of command. One example of this just relates to one of the stupid and inescapable consequences of the existence of any government, and that is corruption. And despite it being so obvious that Russia was planning on launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine pretty soon, that even Western and American, specifically, intelligence got it right, the Russian military officers on the ground at the Russian-Ukrainian border there apparently didn't get the memo. See, the various heavy trucks and other wheeled vehicles needed to bring supplies and other stuff to enable the blitz across the entire east of Ukraine to Kyiv needed new tires for such a long trek, right? So those Russian officers were sent a budget to procure Michelin heavy truck tires, which are expensive, right? So Russian military officers did what Russian military officers tend to do, and that's take that money and go to like Temu and buy some cheap Chinese knockoffs of these tires, and then pocket the rest of the money so they can spend it on vodka and, well, let's be honest, probably just more vodka. So when the day came to finally roll into Ukraine, that massive buildup of military vehicles did indeed roll for a little while. And the convoy did eventually grind to a halt on its crappy tires, just outside, or not far outside Kyiv, forming a 40-mile-long convoy of easy targets of opportunity for the Ukrainian military to pound on, which they did. Another stupid cause of the Russian military's staggering losses from the outset of the war is, and to date, is just the nature of the Russian regime itself. Ever since coming to power, Putin has relied upon his image as this big strongman and effectively bullying any competition out of his way and using the government's monopoly on violence to jail or just murder any opponents foolish enough to challenge his authority. And this creates an atmosphere of fear outside of Putin's government, which is intended. This tends to keep people from even trying to challenge him, knowing they're just going to die in a Siberian gulag somewhere, and that doesn't sound like fun. But it also creates an atmosphere of fear within the government, which, while unintended, is a pretty obvious consequence of being the big strongman who bullies everyone to remain in power. So as such, no one within the Russian government wants to be the guy to give Putin bad news. You know, bad news like, boss, we don't have enough cold weather gear to go around for all these troops. Or, hey, boss, that Su-57 Felon jet is a complete joke. Or, hey, wait, no, we didn't actually capture Kupiansk. Don't go on TV and say that we did. Oh, you did already, shit. That's embarrassing. Anyway, so when you have a stupid government doing stupid things, the trickle-down effect of to the stupid people carrying out these stupid orders tends to be, well, really f***ing stupid. How stupid? Well, after decisively losing the Battle of Kiev, a reinforced regiment-sized bunch of orcs went retreating back north to Belarus. And on the way, they decided that they should stop and dig some entrenchments between Kiev and the Belarusian border. The bad news for the orcs that apparently can't read a map is that where they stopped to dig these reinforcements was a place known as the Red Forest. And the Red Forest gets its name because of the fact that all the needles on all the pine trees are red. And that's because all the pine trees died instantly, at once, as did all the fungi and bacteria that would be responsible for breaking down the needles and causing them to fall off the trees. And of course, what killed all that stuff all at once was a massive release of ionizing radiation from the meltdown of Chernobyl Reactor 4, which was only 2.2 miles away from where these orcs dug their earthen entrenchments. So, due to the typical fog of war and the rather embarrassing nature of this incident to the Russian military and the sympathetic nature of the Belarusian hospitals that these radioactive orcs were taken to for care, we don't have an exact number of how many Russian soldiers died of radiation exposure or were badly sickened or exposed because of the radiation that they dug up and wallowed around in the dirt there outside of Chernobyl. But irradiating themselves in mass probably didn't do that division or reinforced regiment group of orcs any favors, let's face it. And over the course of the entire war, the rest of the Russian army and its navy just wouldn't fare much better. Less than a month into the war, the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Moskva, was hit by 2 Ukrainian Neptune cruise missiles and quickly began doing a submarine impersonation that it's still doing to this day, and it took hundreds of Russian sailors down with it. Ukrainian drone attacks would continue to be so effective that the entire Russian Black Sea Fleet would have to withdraw from occupied Crimea and use ports further east on the Russian mainland and effectively cede the entire southern Ukrainian coastal waters of the Black Sea to Ukraine, which doesn't even have a navy. So, while the front line in the east of Ukraine would fluctuate for the next 4 years, with Ukraine at one point even capturing and occupying a piece of Russia's own Kursk Oblast, the Russians would just fundamentally fail to gain any ground at a meaningful pace throughout the entirety of the conflict to date. I mean, mathematically, even when Russia was gaining ground at the fastest pace it was ever going to do so far during the war, it would still have needed somewhere between 89 and 108 years to go from where that line is to capture all of Ukraine. And given the fact that Russia tends to lose about 500 and 3,300 soldiers per square mile captured, Russia is going to run out of men long before it runs out of time trying to get to Kyiv in this current adventure of theirs. And meanwhile, Russia does have to rely on fairly predictable logistics routes to resupply this line of people that they keep just getting killed at the front. And so this has made Ukraine's job of blowing up, of attriting those frontline troops by blowing the shit out of the guys in the rear with the gear really easy. And this has been stalling Russia's advances in the south, especially even further, and has turned occupied Crimea into basically an island at this point. Now, having your last pathetic moments on this wet rock captured by the FPV drone that's about to yeet you, and then that footage replayed on YouTube set to something like yakety sax, probably sucks. So, I mean, obviously this war has not been going very well for the average Russian soldier. Right now, estimates put their time of existence from deployment into battle to not existing anymore in about 25 minutes. But the thing is, the war hasn't exactly been all that great for the average ethnic Russian back at home either. I mean, at first, at least, the average Russians, and these are typically your Muscovites and St. Petersburg and people from the greater metropolitan area of those cities, they were able to go about their lives without a whole lot of disruption due to the war. I mean, sure, thanks to most Western companies pulling out, they did have to abandon their customary Adidas tracksuits for cheap Chinese knockoffs, and they're not drinking Coca-Cola anymore. They're drinking something called Dobry Cola, I think is how you say it. It's something they can produce with all domestic ingredients, and it's supposed to look like, it's brown anyway, it's supposed to look like Coca-Cola, but from all reports it doesn't taste the same. Shocker. Oh, and one of the other things as a Russian living, just at home, you couldn't talk about the war anymore. That's illegal. In fact, you couldn't even call it a war. Putin made that decree on March 4, so that's just 10 days into his 3-day special military operation. But other than those things, life for the average Russian went on pretty much as normal. That is until about 7 months into the war, when Putin realized he'd lost a lot of men. I mean, a lot of men. The official Russian numbers, which are obviously total bullshit, puts the number at just under 6,000 dead, which is laughable. The Ukrainian military, again, they're going to want to inflate things because of the opponents. They put the number of killed, wounded, and captured Russians at 55,000. And Western intelligence analysts and defense analysts put the number between 20 and 80,000 Russian casualties in that first 7 months of the war. Any way you slice it, ignoring Russia's bullshit numbers, that is a lot of dead and wounded orcs in just 7 months. It took America 8 years to accumulate its staggering total of more than 55,000 soldiers killed in the Vietnam War. The USA had about 24,000 total killed and wounded, mostly wounded, soldiers in its stupid 20-year adventure in Afghanistan. So Russia met that number and possibly doubled or even tripled it in just 7 months of fighting inside Ukraine. So Putin did what dictators who are losing a war that they started as a vanity project are apt to do, and he called for a general mobilization. That is a large-scale conscription of Russian men of fighting age. So Russia called up about 300,000 reservists, although some Western analysts speculate that the number was higher, but either way, about 300,000 guys were called up and sent to fight against Ukraine in Russia's 3-day special military operation that was again now in its seventh month. And while the mobilization did get again some 300,000 or more fresh bodies for Putin's meat grinder, it also successfully mobilized somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million other Russians of fighting age with the means to do so, to just get the fuck out of Russia. And estimates have about 600,000 Russians or 600 to 650,000 Russians of fighting age still permanently, basically living abroad. So that's more than 1 million guys now gone from Russia's fighting age demographic pool in just 7 months. And then you add to that today the 1.4 million Russians either killed or wounded, so not likely to return to the workforce and contribute to the economy after the war anyway. Russia's looming population crisis here is becoming really obvious. And yet, during the vast majority of the conflict, the average ethnic Russian living in the greater Moscow or St. Petersburg area have at least tacitly supported the war or have been more or less apathetic about it, because again, it's not ethnic Russians dying for the most part in Ukraine. It's ethnic minorities from Siberia and elsewhere that are doing most of the getting killed. But in recent years, the Ukrainians have been able to roll out quite a few of these new Flamingo cruise missiles and long-range drones, and these have been put to use expertly in blowing the ever-loving dog shit out of Russian oil refining capabilities way, way, way far from the front lines in Ukraine. They're hitting stuff in Moscow and beyond. And in blowing up all these Russian elements of Russian oil infrastructure, from refinery storage tanks and ports and distribution nodes, the net effect of this has, in addition to some rather odd weather phenomena inside of Moscow, has been a tightening stranglehold on Russian fuel supplies. And that stranglehold is really now starting to be felt quite sharply by the average Russian, and the average Russians are not liking it at all. Now, while watching footage of these poor Russian peasants fistfighting each other over a few liters of gasoline after waiting for days in line to be able to buy it would be sad, normally it's just damn near impossible to sympathize with orcs. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I mean, imagine a New Yorker just idly commenting on how it's perfectly okay that the U.S. military is busily conducting a genocide in Canada, just so long as the knock-on effects of that genocide don't affect their lives in any real way, doesn't inconvenience them. No one would mistake that hypothetical person for being a decent human being. But that attitude has described the vast majority of ethnic Russians for the entirety of this war. And those decent Russians who did voice their opposition to the war on moral grounds early on ended up in jail or dead, and those that had the means to do so simply got out of the country. And I'm not saying that there's some genetic or otherwise intrinsic flaw in orcs that make them generally evil. There's an element, a big element of nurture along with that nature there. And just what is that nurturing influence? Well, it's 3 decades of post-Soviet awfulness following 7 decades of Soviet awfulness. So that's 3 or 4 entire generations of Russians who've known nothing but life under two of the worst examples of 2 of the worst forms of government that anyone's ever imagined. And that's kind of saying a lot, because every form of government is fucking stupid. Russia sucks. And in 2026, most Russians suck because they were born and raised in Russia and raised by Russians who were born and raised in a Russia that's even worse than the Russia that these Russians live in now. That's more than 100 million people. And only something as seriously fucked up as government could turn more than 100 million average people into some varying degree of evil. And for the last 4 years, these aliens and their countrymen have been getting themselves unalived en masse while committing innumerable war crimes in Ukraine, all because one massively stupid fucking told them to. Government is fucking stupid. And so, by extension, wars between governments are really fucking stupid. But we lucky humans on this wet rock are getting to witness probably one of the most single ridiculous examples of government stupidity in recent history. Or, I mean, we had been. I mean, Donald Trump has now decided to make a full 7-course meal out of losing a war to Iran. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe in the USA here we'll get a full mobilization or something else similarly stupid. Because one thing about governments is that they'll always find something yet more stupid to do than the last stupid-ass thing that a government did. This apparently is human progress. But then, of course, letting other humans rule us is about the only thing we humans do the same way consistently as we've done for the last 2,500 years, so I'm not really sure how much progress we're making here. Anyway, thanks for sticking it out this long, and I'll see you next time. And in the meantime, please don't be stupid.